Hello, I'm Camilo Gomez, and this is my story of strategic conversations. Well, I met Chris Voss years ago very briefly in the early 2000s when he was still at the Bureau and I was a tactical medical officer for a police department. Through the years, then we sort of did not have any contact, and then his book came out. And fast forward to when I actually read his book, which I found transformative in many ways. And that led me to take his master class and then take some of his courses. And as part of that journey of following his teachings, I met Nick Nanton, and then I was offered the opportunity to write this book chapter, which I took immediately, because my epiphany after meeting Chris Voss was finding out about negotiation. And it occurred to me at the time when I started listening to what he had to teach, that as a physician, we were never taught, either systematically or even informally, how to negotiate. The training of a physician in an academic setting in particular has to do with debate. There's a huge difference between debating somebody and negotiating with someone. In a debate, which is what I term a form of verbal martial arts, there's always a winner and there's always a loser. Our idea of debate is that we will overcome the other party by prowess in our intellectual knowledge and so forth. While conversely, in a negotiation, the idea is to collaborate really with the other party to achieve the best result possible. And this concept became very important to me because it allowed me to view a dimension that I had not viewed before in terms of how to problem solve a lot of the things that came in my way over the course of daily practice and daily interactions with other individuals. Yeah, the chapter, My Way, Negotiation and Quality, Not Debate, follows some of the thinking that I had already expressed. But it also has to do with the fact that in learning about Chris Voss's concept of what he calls tactical empathy, which I think is a brilliant concept, the idea of using empathy in a very systematic and tactical way to drive the conversation in a negotiation. When applied in concert with critical thinking, which is the dimension that I had been teaching for over 4 decades, and allowing people to develop the clarity of thought of the problem to solve, the problem at hand. Those two concepts complement themselves in such a way that they become like a Venn diagram where it is possible to address both the intellectual aspect of a problem, the data-driven aspect of a problem, but also the humanistic aspect, the emotions that drive the behavior. And as I've learned over the course of time following Chris's teachings, the only way to achieve a good outcome in anything we do that implies a negotiation is if our ultimate purpose is to change behavior. That change in behavior can only occur by driving into the emotions that are the underscoring of the behavior we want to have changed. I think that there is less of a gap than we think. I think that the concept of empathy and critical thinking and how I view it came to be what I used to conceive a concept that I term empathic reasoning, which is essentially the subject of a book that I published recently and which is the subject of a lot of my current teachings, keynote speaking, workshops, etc., etc. And it has to do with having those two items, critical thinking and empathy, complement each other, work in unison. As I said before, like a Venn diagram where there is an overlap between the two of them. I have come up with a tagline that I think illustrates that, which is when EQ, emotional quotient, enhances IQ, intelligence quotient. And I think that the outcome and the product of the sum of the two is much greater than when you put them just together side by side. I would say that I wrote it first and foremost for me. I started because I have found historically in my own experience that I master a concept when I dive into it deeply and when I try to mechanistically understand that concept and master it, and then when I write about it. If it's possible for me to put on paper what I have in my head about a particular concept, it allows me to edit myself, to criticize myself, to improve myself, to improve on the concept. So in order for me to begin to think about teaching about empathic reasoning, and I had to write about it, I had to begin, and the first step was this chapter. It became this chapter for me to understand how it fit. The chapter is very interesting because it is probably the most personal thing I've ever written. It includes a couple of aspects of serious and critical events in my life, both professional and personal. And the chapter is written in a reflective mode, thinking about the possibility of what could have been, what should have been, had I, at that point in my life, at those moments, those critical, difficult times, had I known what I know now about negotiation, would my life have been different? Would the outcomes have been different? And therefore, the chapter allows us to, and allows the reader for that matter, to look at the possibility of introducing empathic reasoning and empathy itself to improve their problem-solving skills and their outcomes in their own lives. Several things can become the outcome of reading our chapter. One is to understand that it is possible to reflect in your own critical and difficult moments in the past and learn from them and learn how to apply empathy as a concept that complements our own analytical skills, our critical thinking, to problem solve. I want them to also learn about me. I want them to learn how, just like Chris Voss has been able to parlay his experience as a hostage negotiator into a teaching and educational framework for empathy, how my own life as an interventional neurologist over 4 decades, making life and death decisions on a daily basis, allows me now to piggyback the concept of empathy into what I know and use those critical thinking skills plus empathy to not only solve problems for people, but even teach people how to solve their own problems even further in the future. So it is possible to get all of that just, I think, from reading the book. I also want them to feel hungry at the end when they're done. I want them to want more information. I want them to go, perhaps even look at my book, look at additional material, interact with us, go to one of my keynote speeches and listen to a lot of the more detailed aspects that expand on the concepts in the chapter. Well, Chris is amazing. I have a lot of respect and admiration for him. He is a solid educator. He has these concepts that are very clear and that he transmits very well. And I think that it has taught me a lot to work with him because it allowed me to follow his lead in transforming what is my experience as a physician, as an interventional neurologist, into my next chapter as an educator. The same way that hostage negotiators make life and death decisions, we do too. If you look at Chris's book, that is Never Split the Difference, look at the subtitle. The subtitle is Negotiate as if your life depends on it. I would like for people to view what we teach as solve your problems as if your life depends on it. And it's the same follow through, because I think the decisions we make on a daily basis are that important. In medicine, in what we do, whether it's when I'm treating a cerebral aneurysm or preventing a stroke or treating a stroke, we have benefit versus risk on the decisions we make. If you look around, we all have the same thing on our daily lives, benefits versus risk. And our ability to put those two together and then insert the aspect of empathy on how that's going to affect others and how others are going to affect us makes for a much wholesome, if you will, framework with which to work. Hello, I'm Camilo Gomez, and this is my story of strategic conversations.